I thought a new house meant a fresh start, until the woman behind my backyard turned my life into a nightmare. One strange meeting, a knife, and a knock at my door. This isn't just about a creepy neighbor, it's about a fear that can show up right outside your home. Hello, my YouTube family. I'm Naira Vox, a 23-year-old college girl with a curious heart and a love for the unknown. And tonight, I bring you my third horror story on this channel. So for the best experience, put on your headphones, turn off the lights, and let your imagination drift into the darkness. If you enjoy the chills and the thrill, show some love in the comments and don't forget to subscribe for more haunted tales every single week. I never really thought I'd share this, but now, after all this time, I feel safe enough to talk about it. Like, whatever happened can't reach me anymore, especially now that it's just a memory floating in the past. It all began when my husband and I decided to leave behind the noisy city life. With our third little one just born, our apartment felt more like a storage closet than a home. Cribs, toys, diapers, you name it. We needed space, peace, a fresh start. Eventually, we settled into a quiet suburban neighborhood, the kind where folks wave at you in the mornings and forget to lock their doors at night. The house wasn't fancy or huge, but for us, it felt like moving into a dream. What truly stole my heart was the backyard. Hidden behind a creaky wooden fence was this wild, half-forgotten garden. Vines curling around ancient stone, moss-covered paths that seemed to lead nowhere, and statues, these worn, silent figures standing still like watchers from another era. A little unsettling, sure, but to me it felt magical, mysterious, like the yard had secrets it wanted to keep. Honestly, I didn't care much, so I left the backyard exactly the way we found it, statues and all. Less effort for me, and I wasn't about to complain about that. A few days after we moved in, I was sipping coffee, casually staring out the window, when something odd caught my eye. One of the statues, an angel, maybe, was facing away from the house. The others all turned toward us. It just looked off. I was pretty sure they were all aligned the same way before, but maybe I was wrong. I brushed it off, told myself I was just overthinking. The next morning, though, I glanced outside again. Another statue had turned. This one, too, was now facing away. That time I was sure, absolutely sure. Something wasn't right. I brought it up to my husband, but he just chuckled and said I was being dramatic. Maybe I was. Maybe not. I even thought for a second that our son, Jimmy, might be behind it. He was always pulling silly pranks. But when I asked him, he gave me that confused, wide-eyed look only kids can give when they truly don't know what you're talking about. I didn't think he'd do something that weird anyway. Still, deep down, I knew something strange was happening. I couldn't explain it, and I had no proof, but it was there. I could feel it. Even so, I kept quiet. There were bigger things on my plate. Money was tight, really tight. And every day, I carried that constant fear of losing my job, like walking a tightrope over fire. For a few days, things were calm. No movement, no unease. Just normal. I started to breathe easy again. But then one evening, that afternoon, I looked out the window and my heart nearly froze. Every single statue was now standing in a perfect row, just inches from the back of our house. Not scattered, not turned, aligned, silent, still. The sight felt unreal, like something straight out of a nightmare I didn't remember having. And yet, I could feel it, the weight of their eyes, watching me, not just stone. Something else. Something wrong. My chest tightened. I could barely breathe. I couldn't decide what felt worse, how eerie it looked, or how deeply it unsettled me. I needed answers. I hesitated at the back door, eyes scanning every corner of the yard. It was bright out, sun overhead, but that didn't matter. I felt paranoid.
Watched.
Small. Still, I pushed the door open. One shaky step after another, I moved closer to the row of statues. I reached out and tried to lift one. It didn't move, not even an inch. They were heavier than they looked, far too heavy for anyone, let alone a child, to shift on their own. Just as I turned to call out, my wife stepped into the yard. The fear on her face mirrored mine. This wasn't just in my head. She mumbled maybe someone in the neighborhood was behind it. Some sick joke. Trying to spook the new family on the block. But that didn't sit right with me. None of the neighbors gave off that kind of energy. They were friendly, normal. And who in their right mind would go this far, especially with kids in the house? This wasn't a prank. It felt more like a threat. We called the police. They came, walked around, took notes. But in the end, all they could suggest was installing cameras. We didn't have the budget for that. Heck, we were struggling as it was. I nodded and told them we'd look into it. But truthfully, I wasn't sure I wanted to go that route. Something about recording this, making it real, it scared me more. After they left, there was a strange silence between us. We did our best to act normal for the kids. No way we were going to let them feel that fear. The following day passed quietly, and the one after that, nothing. But deep down, I knew it wasn't over. I told myself maybe the police showing up had scared whoever, or whatever, it was away. It made sense, sort of. We tried to move on, pretend it was over. But the truth? Neither of us felt safe. Not really. I tried to believe my wife. Maybe it was a one-time prank. But every time I walked past a window, I found myself glancing outside, expecting something, anything, to be different. There's a certain kind of fear that only settles in when you no longer feel safe in your own home. And I pray no one ever has to know what that feels like. Still, days passed quietly. No movement. No strange sights. No statues out of place. For a while, it felt almost normal again. The kids were laughing. My wife was smiling more. Even I started to believe the worst was behind us. I couldn't have been more wrong. It was the weekend, Saturday or Sunday, I'm not sure. The kids didn't have school, and we were all in good spirits that morning. After breakfast, I took them out back to play. That's when I saw it. Bold, black letters, spray-painted across the rear wall of our house. Go away. My stomach dropped. I nearly let go of my son. I didn't think. I just acted. I pulled the kids inside, my voice trembling as I told my wife to lock the doors and stay with them. Then something snapped in me. I don't know what came over me. I've never been the confrontational type, but that moment I was furious, shaking, burning with something deeper than fear. I tore through the yard, screaming into the air, yelling, threatening, hoping daring someone to show themselves. I didn't care if it was reckless. I wanted answers. I wanted a face to put to the fear. But the garden stood empty, silent, still. No footprints, no shadow, nothing. I stopped looking. My feet turned toward the house, but the adrenaline from earlier had already shifted into something much darker.
Fear.
This wasn't just a prank anymore. It was a direct message. A warning. Whoever it was, they'd meant to scare us, and I had a sinking feeling things were only going to get worse. The police came back. Another report. but with no real leads, there wasn't much they could do. I begged them to stay on the property, to keep an eye on us, but they told me there wasn't enough evidence to justify using resources like that. As far as they were concerned, it could have been some bored teenagers trying to mess with us. I couldn't believe my ears. Teenagers? They said they'd keep a patrol officer nearby, but it didn't bring me much comfort. My wife was even more shaken up than I was. She needed reassurance, so I told her everything would be okay. But inside, I was losing it. Later that night, I was in the kitchen when I heard it. A scream. It came from the living room. My wife. I ran in, heart pounding, and she was standing by the window, frozen, pointing outside. I followed her finger, and my stomach hit the floor. There were 5 figures in the yard, each one wearing a white face mask, their features hidden. They were dancing, but it wasn't graceful. It was jerky, unnatural, like puppets on strings. We didn't speak. We didn't move. We just watched, frozen in terror. It was like watching something out of a nightmare. I couldn't understand what they were trying to do, but it was easily the most disturbing thing I'd ever witnessed. I snapped out of my daze, my instincts taking over. I grabbed the biggest kitchen knife I could find and screamed at my wife to call the police. Without thinking, I ran out the back door, knife in hand. I screamed, louder than I've ever screamed, and took one step toward them. But then I froze. There were 5 of them, and only one of me. They could have been armed. The panic set in, and before I could think, I turned and ran back inside like a coward. But the knife had done something. It must have scared them. They stopped dancing and vanished into the garden, out of sight. I yelled to my wife, "Get upstairs, find the kids, and hide." I stood by the back door, heart racing, prepared for the worst. I couldn't let them get in. By the time the police arrived, the yard was empty. They searched the entire property, but there was no trace of them anywhere. That was it. I couldn't take it anymore, no matter the cost. I bought and installed security cameras the very next day. My wife, she was hysterical, begging me, pleading for us to move far away from that place. I told her, if one more thing happens, we'll move. But we'd probably be screwing ourselves financially if we do. Thankfully, the security cameras seemed to do their job. Those figures never returned, and we didn't experience any more strange incidents at the house. But the scariest part? We still live in that same house to this day, and we never got an explanation for what happened. Recently, my wife Taylor and I decided to leave. She didn't like being so close to her family and wanted to put some space between us and them. So, that's exactly what we did. We don't have kids, and Taylor stopped working a while ago, so she was open to my suggestions on where to move. As for me, I'm an electrician, so bouncing around is no big deal. We eventually found a fantastic deal on a house in New Mexico, out in the country. It was perfect for us, much bigger than we needed, especially since it's just the 2 of us and our black lab, Lola. But honestly, we figured we could use the extra space. Maybe even host some friends we'd make out here. A few months passed and everything seemed fine. Then I started noticing something strange. The upstairs lights kept tripping the circuits, but the rest of the house was perfectly fine. After it happened once or twice, I knew exactly what the problem was. Like I said, I'm an electrician. This kind of thing is second nature to me. I figured it would be a quick fix. Just a matter of rearranging some of the load on the breaker, which in all likelihood was downstairs. Moments like these make me thankful that I'm the kind of person who knows how to fix things. I hadn't spent much time in the basement since we moved in. Honestly, I didn't have a real reason to. When the realtor showed us the place, we gave it a quick glance, but I didn't pay much attention. Now that I think about it, I don't think I'd been down there a single time since then. So one afternoon, I decided to head down and take a look for the main breaker. The basement was cluttered, more like a storage room than a functional space. After a bit of searching, I found the main breaker and started messing with it. About 10 minutes in, I figured out where the load imbalance was and told myself I'd rewire it when I had more time. Just as I was about to head upstairs, curiosity took over. I was already down there, so why not take a look around? After all, it was my house, and it felt strange not to know every inch of it. Most of the basement was filled with old furniture and random junk. Nothing worth noting, really. I figured trying to turn it into a usable space would be more hassle than it was worth. But then, something caught my eye in the far corner of the basement. Behind a stack of old wooden chairs was a large metal door. This wasn't just any door, though. It was industrial grade, much taller than any normal door, and it looked solid, way thicker than anything I'd seen before. I walked over to the door, and my suspicions were confirmed. It looked like something you'd expect to see on a walk-in safe or a panic room. At first, I thought maybe it was a tornado shelter or storm room, but that seemed odd. If it was something important, you'd think the realtor would have mentioned it. I tried to open it, but the handle wouldn't budge. It was locked. I went upstairs, digging through the drawer of keys the previous owners had left behind, hoping to find one that worked. I must have tried about 15 keys, but none of them fit. Frustrated, I told Taylor about it, and she was just as curious as I was. Somehow, she worked her magic and got us in touch with the previous owners. That phone call was the moment my curiosity shifted to full-blown concern. They were strange on the phone. They paused frequently, like they were thinking carefully about what to say, or maybe trying not to say too much. Part of me wishes I'd recorded it, but hindsight is always clearer. When I asked about the door, the line went quiet for a moment. Finally, the wife said it was just a safe room in case of a tornado. I told her that was fine, but we were unable to access it because it was locked. After another long pause, she said they'd lost the key and told us to just ignore it. That didn't sit right with me. They'd left us keys for all sorts of random doors we'd probably never need. The way she said it made my stomach turn. But at that moment, there was nothing else I could do. We ended up hanging up quickly after that. They weren't interested in chatting, and it was obvious. Taylor tried to brush it off, saying I was overthinking everything, but I couldn't let it go. Over the next few weeks, I would occasionally wander downstairs, just staring at that door, wondering what was behind it. I tried everything I could think of to open it, some tricks from work, but the lock was solid. Eventually, I gave up for about a week, but curiosity kept gnawing at me. Fast forward to 2 days ago, when things took a strange turn. Despite Taylor's protests, I decided to hire a locksmith to get into the room. I let him work on it, and after about 30 minutes, I went down to check on him. He told me the lock was unusually complex for what should have been a simple panic room. Those were his exact words. I was worried he wouldn't be able to crack it, but to my surprise, he actually managed to get it open after another half hour. I wish he hadn't. Inside the room, it looked like some kind of shrine. Old black and white photographs lined the walls, all covered in strange symbols I didn't recognize. In the center of the room was a chair, facing the wall, like someone had spent a lot of time just sitting there, staring at nothing. There was a cot in one corner, with crumpled blankets, and it smelled stale, kind of gross. Then I noticed the trash. Empty chip bags, crumpled water bottles, and it hit me. Someone had been staying down there.
And not that long ago.
I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I didn't think the situation could get any worse, but of course it did. As I was trying to process everything, I noticed a second door on the far side of the room. It was small, partially hidden by the dim light, but it was definitely there. I opened it, and I couldn't believe what I found: a set of stairs leading to the cellar door inside the house. I felt like such an idiot. I hadn't even thought to check the cellar door when we moved in, assuming it just led to the basement. And in all the time we'd lived here, I'd never opened it. My bewilderment quickly turned to terror. Someone had actually been living in my house, who knows for how long. Everything started to click in my mind. Since we moved in, my wife and I had noticed a few strange things we couldn't explain. Most of the time, it was just things going missing, and I'd always chalked it up to my wife misplacing things. She did have a tendency to do that. But this discovery changed everything. Someone had been living in our house. I kept repeating that thought in my head, trying to wrap my mind around what was going on. I didn't know who had been in there or why, but I sure as hell didn't want them coming back. I tried calling the previous owners, demanding an explanation, maybe even threatening legal action, but they wouldn't pick up. They either disconnected their number or just didn't want to deal with it. Taylor was freaked out, and so was I. That night, I took heavy furniture and barricaded the cellar door from the inside. I found a heavy-duty chain and padlocked it shut for good measure. I didn't care what it took. There was no way I was going to let anyone come back. I realized that someone could have been sneaking back in through that door. The police came, took down a full report, and promised to do their best to get in contact with the previous owners. We even called our realtor, who was horrified and said she'd assist the police in any way she could. That night, as we were getting ready for bed, we heard it. A loud bang on the front door. Lola shot up, barking like crazy, and we both froze. We didn't move, just stared at each other, listening. After a few minutes, the banging stopped. But then we heard small rocks tapping against our bedroom window. Taylor held on to Lola, and I went to check out the window. Taylor begged me not to, but at that point, I was furious. In my mind, I was preparing for a fight with whoever was out there. I grabbed the baseball bat from under the bed, yanked the curtains away from the window, but I couldn't see a thing. We thought it was over. Taylor wanted me to call the police, but there was this part of me that wanted to handle it myself. I knew the police would scare them off, but I needed to make sure whoever was out there got caught. I told Taylor, if one more thing happens, I'll call. And then, from downstairs, I heard it. The sound of glass shattering. I sprinted downstairs just in time to see two figures running away from the house. The kitchen window was completely shattered. That's when I called the police. They showed up not long after and searched the house and the basement. But there was no sign of forced entry into the storm room, and they didn't find anyone on the property either. Their best guess was that whoever had been living down there was angry after realizing they were locked out and decided to come back to scare us. I was both furious and horrified. My wife has been a wreck ever since the police escalated the situation. An actual crime happened, and the authorities said they were working on tracking down the previous owners, but that it could take a few days. That was 2 full days ago, and we still haven't been able to get in contact with them. I think the police scared the squatters off, at least for now, because they haven't been back since. Honestly, I'm shocked something like this could even happen in the first place. If we can't get in touch with the previous owners soon, I honestly have no idea what I'm going to do. I'm fully prepared to defend myself, but I hope it doesn't come to that. When I bought my first house, I was only 27. I'd saved up for years, and even though it was just a small, modest place, I was proud of it. Moving in, though, that took some adjustment. I had lived with my parents my whole life, alongside 3 siblings and 2 dogs. The house was always loud, always buzzing with life. But this was quiet. Really quiet. That was honestly the hardest part of the transition. The lack of noise. Living alone felt strange, and at first, I wasn't sure I'd ever get used to it. I'm sure anyone who's gone from living with family to living alone knows exactly what I'm talking about. One of the things I loved about the house was the tiny balcony on the 2nd floor. Don't get me wrong, I wouldn't exactly call it a balcony. It was barely big enough to stand on, and I couldn't even fit a chair out there. But still, I went out there most nights after work to take a break and clear my head. I smoked pretty often, but I hated the smell, so smoking inside was never an option for me. That little balcony was perfect for that. No need to step outside or leave the comfort of my home just to smoke. It felt like a luxury. Let me describe the layout of the property, so everything I'm about to tell you makes sense. The block I lived on was pretty standard, with houses right next to each other all down the street. Behind mine, it was exactly the same, meaning everyone's house shared a backyard, except for the 10-foot-tall fences that marked the property lines. From my balcony, I could see over my own backyard neighbor's fence into his yard. I could see the entire place, really. After a few weeks of living there, I realized I had met almost all the neighbors except for him. Come to think of it, I don't think I'd ever seen him, let alone spoken to him. The guy never waved, never came over. I never saw him in the yard or even at the bedroom window. Nothing. It was like he didn't exist. If it weren't for the occasional bedroom light on at night, I would have assumed the place was deserted. I guess there was an old person living there since the grass hadn't been cut in years, and I never heard any sounds from the yard. After another week, curiosity got the best of me, and I decided it was time to introduce myself and at least put a face to the name. One Saturday, I walked around the block to his place, expecting to knock on the door and maybe make some small talk. But when I got there, the house looked rough. Rough was putting it mildly. It looked like it hadn't been touched in ages. The yard was a mess, overgrown with weeds, and the whole place seemed like it had been neglected for years. The paint was chipping, some of the siding had been scratched off, and the walkway was stained. I rang the doorbell, but it was broken, so I knocked a few times, loud enough to be heard. I waited, but nothing. I started to feel awkward standing there, wondering if maybe the place was actually vacant. But then I saw it, a slight movement behind the window shade. Just a flicker, like someone was peeking out. That was enough for me to realize someone was in there, watching me, but for some reason, they wouldn't open the door. I was about to turn and leave when, suddenly, the door flew open with such force it slammed against the wall, as if someone had ripped it open in a violent rage. I jumped back, totally thrown off guard. Before I could even react, I found myself face to face with an elderly Asian woman standing in the doorway. She was short, with gray hair pulled back tightly into a bun. Her skin was wrinkled but somehow tense, as if she were flexing her face muscles, if that even makes sense. Her eyes were wide, almost unnervingly wide. I can't even lie, it made me feel uneasy. I was seriously freaked out just looking at her. There was something off about her, like it seemed like she was on something. She didn't say a word, just stared at me with no expression on her face. After a few seconds, I cleared my throat and introduced myself as her new neighbor. She paused, and then slowly, she said her name was Priscilla. She gave me a half smile, and that was it. She didn't even ask for my name, just stood there, watching me. I nodded, turned away, not knowing what to say. I left feeling more unsettled than I cared to admit. I didn't hear the door close behind me, but I didn't want to turn around and risk getting caught looking back. Later that night, I went out to my balcony like usual, trying to shake off the bizarre interaction. At that point, I had no idea what kind of ordeal I had just gotten myself into. As I glanced over the railing, there she was, the crazy-looking woman from earlier. She was standing dead center in her yard, looking straight up at my house. She didn't move, didn't call out, just stood there staring. It was one of those moments where you question your sanity, wondering if what you're seeing is real. I didn't know whether to wave, say something, or pretend I hadn't noticed her. It was one of the creepiest things I'd ever witnessed, and I had no idea how to handle it. I quickly went back inside, trying to reassure myself that she was just a little messed up in the head, and I shouldn't let it get to me. I told myself it was just some harmless old lady, but deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. And it didn't end there. The following night, things took a darker turn. I saw her again, but this time, she was moving from one window to another inside her house, watching me from each one. Although I pretended not to notice her, part of me felt like she knew that I knew she was watching. I hoped she'd stop, but she didn't. She kept staring at me even when I finished smoking and turned to go inside. Out of curiosity, about 20 minutes later, I peeked out of my window to see if she was still watching my house. To my horror, she was. I called my dad, hoping he could reassure me. He told me she probably had dementia or something, that she was just lonely or confused. He said I should feel bad for her. It was hard to feel sympathy for someone who seemed to be stalking me, but my dad calmed my nerves, telling me she was harmless. A few nights passed without anything strange happening. I didn't see her in her yard or at any of her windows. I thought maybe my dad had been right, and I started to feel relieved that I hadn't done something drastic. That is, until one morning when I found a woman's sock on my side of the fence, just sitting in my yard. I stared at it, feeling a chill run through me. This wasn't just strange behavior anymore. She had been on my property. I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to confront her, but I also felt like I couldn't just ignore it. I should have called the police right then, but I didn't want to cause problems with a neighbor. That night, as I was lying in bed, the doorbell started ringing. Not once, not twice, at least a dozen times, one right after the other. I didn't even need to look. I knew it was her. In my tired haze, I just felt a growing sense of dread. I wasn't thinking clearly. I was more annoyed than scared. I threw on a shirt, went to the door, and told myself I'd just ask her to leave me alone. I convinced myself that I had put this off long enough, and it was about time I dealt with it. I don't know why I wasn't scared in that moment. Looking back now, I cringe at how casually I handled the situation. I wouldn't even say I was naive, but I can't think of a better word to describe my attitude toward it all. The second I opened the door, she lunged at me. She charged at me with terrifying speed, a kitchen knife in her hand. Her face was twisted in pure rage, and she started screaming. She was yelling something about how I had taken her son from her. I barely had time to process what was happening. I grabbed her arm, managing to wrestle the knife away from her. I pinned her down on the floor, and while it was easy to overpower her, it didn't make the situation any less terrifying. My heart was racing, and my hands were shaking as I held her there and called the police. She continued to scream, ranting about her son and threatening to kill me. At one point, she tried to bite me, but I wasn't going to let her go until the police arrived. The 5 minutes felt like the longest of my life. She didn't stop screaming or squirming the entire time. When the police finally arrived, they restrained her and shoved her into one of their cruisers. She screamed the whole way, and I could still hear her even after they slammed the car door. I had never been more scared in my life. The police made sure I was okay and told me she'd be sent to a psychiatric facility. I never saw her again after that. This incident still weighs heavily on my mind. It's made me much more paranoid and cautious. I ended up moving out not even a year later,